Welcome to Hell. Also in graphic novel form. Visceral Games' Dante's Inferno is one in a long line of works inspired by Dante Alighieri's spellbinding depiction of hell. The original poem burrowed into our cultural consciousness like few other texts have. Not only is Dante's Divine Comedy easily the most celebrated and respected fictional text from the Italian language, but it defined our collective conception of the Judeo-Christian hell. So it should come as no surprise that artists of all mediums have done up adaptations of the poem and work inspired by the poem, from novels to films and everything in between. So to begin discussing the graphic novel inspired by the game inspired by the poem, we should get up to speed on the game itself to give us some context. Visceral's take was met with middling reception at launch, and the critics do bring up a number of fair points, like how doing the same set of special judgment moves over and over to unlock upgrades starts to feel like a slog, and how the combat system is nicked wholesale from God of War. But I always loved the game's take on Dante's vision, and the visual design was and is its biggest strength. I actually think certain parts of the game surpass any adaptation of the poem that came before it. I know that's a bold statement, because Gustave Doré's paintings and his brilliant use of light and shadow are some of the most respected pieces of the style, but I'll try and justify it real quick with just two of my favorites. Greed is one of the shortest parts of Hell in the poem, not even getting a full canto to itself, and it consists entirely of hoarders and wasters rolling rocks against each other. The game reimagines the final tomb of the greedy as a cavernous palace of golden rocks, with shades writhing in pits of molten gold. The hoarders and wasters are cast in gold and bound together at the waist, constantly pulling apart from each other. There's even a little puzzle whose imagery depicts the rot and decay of material goods. They didn't just make it more visually interesting, they were bold enough to change the way in which the greedy were punished. I have more to say about the differences between poem and game, but I'll save that for another video. And Heresy, oh man. Heresy retains Dante's original vision of atheists and anti-Christians being locked inside individual fiery coffins, unable to see or be seen by the outside hell. But it expands it to a real, sprawling city with countless tombs as far as the eye can see. I'm not gonna lie, this area gives me chills every time. Sorry to bury the lead, but my point is, graphic novels are an essentially, graphic medium. So when the source material cuts such a powerful image, we're starting out on the right foot. But I have to say straight up that the artwork in this book isn't for everyone. If you've read Dead Space Liberation, this art is similar. Taking it just as imagery, a lot of these pages are beautiful and fascinating in how many layers they incorporate. I tend to notice things only after gazing at a given page for a little while. But as a story about concrete characters and concrete places, you might find it a little off-putting, because some of the art is so abstract that it borders on interpretive. I dig it as it's presented here, but you might find it odd. But the book does have a uniform style throughout. It understands what it wants to do, and it holds the line. Contrast this to the tie-in movie, which has some pretty radical shifts in the art style numerous times throughout the film, which can be especially jarring when characters suddenly look completely different from one scene to the next. Just to digress, they used this same technique in the Dead Space Extraction movie, except I think it was more appropriate in that Dead Space film, because that plot dealt with a group of survivors recounting their experience during a necromorph outbreak, and each animation shift corresponded to a different character's telling. But that's a subject for another video. If I keep bringing up Dead Space, it's because that Series 2 was developed by the late Visceral Games, so it makes sense to me to look at both Dante and Isaac Clarke's adventures as different steps on the same creator's journey. The graphic novel follows the same general plot as the game. Lovers Beatrice and Dante are wrest apart when Dante, recast as a buff medieval soldier instead of a poet, is called on to fight in the Crusades. Beatrice makes a wager with Lucifer, as one does, that her lover will remain faithful until he returns. Dante commits some particularly untoward acts while he's off crusading. Okay, he basically fills in his entire mortal sin bingo card, and when she's killed as Dante returns, she's whisked off to the gates of hell, and Dante follows her to get her back from Lucifer's clutches. Regardless of your opinion on the plot, I just take it as an excuse to get us to go through hell. because in all variations of the story, including in the poem where the only reason Dante goes through hell is because Beatrice wants him to get right with his faith, hell itself is the reason we as readers, players, or viewers are there. And it's here where the unconventional artwork gives us some truly spellbinding pages. These are awesome. The graphic novel also elaborates on some characterization and plot points that the game left unspoken, such as how Beatrice's turn back to the light is not only inspired by Dante's moment of complete self-sacrifice, but also by her acknowledgement that as she was being taken through hell, she succumbed to the same sins as Dante did. And the book is a little more direct about the lechery of Dante's father, inspiring Dante's own turn to lust. Interestingly enough, the book, film, and game play up different parts of hell while downplaying others. The city of Dis is one of my favorite areas in the game, but you can blink and you'll miss it in the graphic novel. But the 8th circle, the Malabulge, is a whole other story. Even fans of the game like myself probably all agree that the Malabulge was a wasted opportunity. Everything up to and including the city of Dis is an absolutely fantastic feast for the eyes, but the Malabulge is reduced to a protracted collection of minigames, with the visceral torments of the fraudulent damned reduced to statues depicting the torments, within bland, dark blue corridors copied and pasted ad nauseum in lieu of actual level design. I tend to guess that the Malabulge was programmed near the end of the development cycle, and that was the spot where they had run out of time or money or both, because in the epic poem, the Malabulge is actually one of the most richly detailed parts of the Inferno, and there's so much about it that could have been translated to a good game. Now, there are other elements from the poem that should have been put into the game, such as the Gorgons at the gates of Dis and the Minotaur at the entry to Violence. I'm sorry, I can't put an easy puzzle with the statue of a Minotaur on the same level as a living, charging Minotaur, which both the film and the graphic novel have, but the Malabulge suffers the most from what isn't there. Now check out what the graphic novel does. First of all, we do get a confrontation in the Malabulge between Dante and the bishop who claimed that the Crusaders were automatically absolved for all the various war crimes they'd commit. The bishop is shown to be this grotesque titan, which might have made for a nice mini-boss if it had been in the game. Dante actually forges his way through each Bolgia, fighting special enemies in each, made from sinners that the demons have weaponized. The game actually does this in other areas, from the blade babies of purgatory, to the conjurers in heresy, to the disgusting gluttons. In the graphic novel, Dante fights the sorcerers with their heads screwed on backwards, the thieves who have been transformed into giant snakes, and first of all, that's exactly what happens to the thieves in the original text. And secondly, you wish we had fought these guys. Then he's got the living fires that torture the evil counselors, those creepy sowers of discord who are constantly crumbling and reforming into new shapes, and the falsifiers puking their plague carrier guts out at him. This is so much better, so much more hellish than the rote minigame collection we got in the game. Shit, I don't want to play minigames in the heart of hell. I want to run Death's Scythe through giant hell cobras. I'm almost tempted to assume these were Visceral's original ideas for the Malabulge before they ran into some sort of time or money crunch, because what we got for that section can't be what this visionary studio really wanted. But at least it exists in some form thanks to the graphic novel, even though it's not quite the same as just having it in the game. Despite having both a graphic novel and film tie-in to its name, and an ending that hinted at a future adaptation of Purgatorio, Dante's Inferno turned out to be a one-off, unlike Dead Space, which was Visceral's baby from the ground up. Visceral and babies, I had to say it. But the game's art direction bleeds into the graphic novel, and I'll always applaud Visceral Games for daring to stake their claim in the canon of Dante adaptations. I'd honestly say that what their art team brings to the table makes up for the nagging issues with the game design. And with the graphic novel, you don't really have to deal with those issues anyway. It might have fallen away as a one-off, but I know there are fans of Visceral's Dante out there. Just as an aside, 2 Octobers ago I worked at a Halloween shop, one of the most fun experiences of my life, and I actually did meet a guy who was trying to put together a cosplay of Visceral's Dante. And if you're a fan of Visceral Games' Dante's Inferno, this graphic novel adaptation gets my infernal brand of approval. If you've enjoyed the look and feel of the pages I've shown in this video, go check it out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of this video in the Book Nook. If you like this type of review, maybe you enjoy reading, so check out my website for plenty of text articles on games, film, and more. Link in the description below, and if you want something a bit more fictional, it also has links to my novels in physical and digital formats. I'll see you next time!